So let's start. Everyone, thank you for joining us. We're going to have more people join us, I'm sure, as we have this conversation. But I am so excited to have you guys here today for this town hall. I'm your moderator. My name is Aarti Swaminathan. I work with Yahoo Finance, and today we're going to talk about for-profit schools. And joining me today are four amazing panelists. We have Toby Merrill. She founded and directs the project on predatory lending, which represents low-income student loan borrowers in predatory lending cases against for-profit and trade schools. She does a ton of litigation work, so she knows a lot about borrower defense, stuff like that you may have questions about. And she has actually helped a lot of people have their debt canceled. Raymond Curtis is the state policy manager at Veterans Education Success. He is a first-generation college student and a fourth-generation veteran. He will answer a lot of questions that you guys may have about why for-profit schools try to recruit from veterans, especially. Alex Shivanow is an award-winning filmmaker from the San Francisco Bay Area, and he made this movie, Fail State, and it's a huge documentary, an expose on predatory for-profit colleges and the student debt crisis. He was also a policy fellow at the Student Defense, which is a legal nonprofit. And last but not least, we have Sanders Fabares. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. He is a former student at the Art Institute of San Diego from 2002 to 2006. He attended that school. Obviously, most of you know it's a for-profit school, but it left him with thousands of dollars in student loan debt. But now he's an activist, debt striker, and one of the administrators of the IMAI, which is a Facebook group that some of you may be a part of. And it has like 10,000 members. I'm not on Facebook, so I'm like doubly amazed at how many people have sort of banded together. So I'm going to start with a very general question. It's obviously about COVID. We've seen a lot of pressure on businesses, all businesses, and higher education is kind of a business, right? So we're seeing for-profits like have enrollment tick up. So the problem is we've seen this story before during the recession. So I want to start with you, Alex. Do you see any similarities between what's happening now with what happened during the recession in 2008, 2009?
I think so. And it's likely too early to even see the full extent of what's about to happen. I mean, COVID was, March to now. And we'll see how long this is prolonged. We'll see what happens with the job market. If more and more people become unemployed, oftentimes during recessions and downturns in the economy, people turn to higher education because they either want to better themselves, get different skills, kind of improve their job prospects. A lot of adults will actually just go to school for the first time. And so, like I said before, as the economy continues to be in the state it's in, we're going to see a lot of parallels. I think the one of the optimistic points that I can say is that unlike the recession, where effectively for-profit colleges were largely the only types of schools that were offering online education, this time around, so many traditional colleges, like your community colleges to your four-year state schools and above, they're offering online classes. There's online degree programs, and so that's just competition. And in Fail State, I talk a lot about competition. I'm holding my breath. I'm hoping that less students are impacted, but these schools are still out there. There's, as here in California, it's 5 o'clock. Probably some of these schools are still open. They're still recruiting students. They're out there. I think Career Education Corporation, which was recently changed its name, they opened a massive recruiting center in Arizona. So this stuff is still happening. It's part of the reason why we're doing this town hall.
So you said California. Sanders, you are in California. You attended the Art Institute. What was that experience like? How was the recruitment process like? And what got you interested in the school in the first place?
Well, for my own story, I went to the University of Arizona back when it was way more affordable than it is now. I had a decent experience there back in 2000, but I wanted to supplement that with maybe some better equipment because I wanted to learn film at the time. The public schools didn't have the level of equipment that I wanted right when digital was getting big. So I looked into the Art Institute, saw their ads everywhere, and they were calling me like crazy. And finally, I went to an open house to check them out, and they did have some pretty good equipment at the time. But what really got me to sign was when they presented me with a 94.7% chance of job placement in the industry I wanted to go into, and they showed me that before I signed, and that's like the chief thing that really led me to go there. But yeah, it was a terrible education, terrible training, because of the student to teacher ratio. I never got the training that I needed to go into the industry. It was really subpar. So yeah, that's kind of how my experience with the school. Yeah, and then for the next decade, yeah, I just basically lived in shame with that debt. So
You mentioned ads, and ads are a big motivator for how these schools kind of get the word out. We see, I don't know how many of you guys in the audience have seen an ad on TV. I've seen so many ads on TV myself. University of Phoenix, so many ads and things like that. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting is a lot of them target military veterans. And now, Raymond, the GI Bill was passed more than 75 years ago. Huge, generous benefits to veterans. But there's a specific loophole that these schools kind of target. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called the 90-10 loophole, and it comes from something called the 90-10 rule. So the 90-10 rule is supposed to be a market viability test. If these schools are providing a quality education product to people other than the federal government should be willing to pay for it. But because the law is written so that only federal funding from the Department of Education counts towards the 90% cap, other federal funding in higher ed, like the GI Bill or like other Department of Defense dollars, goes towards the 10% bottom line. The 90-10 loophole puts a bullseye basically on the backs of student veterans, and they become this golden goose who is providing a padding for this 10%. They use aggressive recruiting tactics and even commit fraud to convince veterans to enroll and bring them with them tuition benefits, allow the institution to fill that 10% quota for other sources of revenue. So this means that an institution could be getting all of its revenue from the federal government sources while still technically complying with that 90-10 rule. And it opens up all of that federal money from Title IV. So we're talking about Pell Grants and government subsidized student loans.
Right. So it seems like there are a lot of ways in which these schools just find ways to make money. Toby, I wanted to ask you, so what is usually the kind of people that for-profit schools target, and how can we be alert if we are basically being targeted? I mean, what do we do?
Well, I just I want to be clear, especially looking a little at what people are saying in the chat, that I don't think that anyone who was targeted by a for-profit school, that it's their fault or that anyone should have known better. These schools spend millions and millions of dollars and are truly expert in appearing legitimate and in making a really strong sales pitch. And I think that what I hear over and over again from our clients, and what we hear even in the conversation that we've had so far, is that there are really good reasons for that, right? Like, they are taking in all this taxpayer money and they're spending it on marketing and on appearing legitimate. And so I don't think that it should be up to individuals to be able to exempt themselves somehow from, multi-million-dollar marketing and lobbying machines. That's just not the right level of protection. That said, and moreover, for-profit schools have started to infiltrate other aspects of higher education and have bought out the sort of like online components of some well-respected schools. And so it is really hard for people to know, even if they come in really well-informed, what they're getting. That said, there is a lot of evidence that for-profit schools are targeting, in particular, communities of color and first-generation college students. And, some of that evidence you can see from enrollment statistics, where there's just an outsized enrollment of people of color at for-profit colleges. And it's really a form of race discrimination, because they're selling a substandard product and targeting a protected group for that. So that is something that we have a case about now against the Florida Career College for race discrimination in targeting Black students for enrollment.
And I see a lot of people making really the same observations, where some said they were first generation, they didn't have the right sort of guidance. But I just want to quickly ask the audience a question. Have you filed a borrower defense claim? And if so, we're going to put up a poll question. Hopefully you can answer that. We'll come back to that later with Toby. But I want to ask all of you, as you answering this poll question, what is one word to describe your experience at a for-profit school? Type it below. And Raymond, as a first-generation student yourself, what are some of the red flags that you can tell people? I know that, Toby, we talked a little about, these schools are really, really good at hiding who they are. So what are some of the obvious red flags? Is it that they have so many ads? Maybe that could be one. What kind of red flags?
For starters, I'd say the biggest one is this push to get you to hurry, register, sign, get enrolled. We want to do this fast. We need to do this fast. Quality institutions who care about your education and care about what you're going to do with it are going to want you to take that time. They don't want students that are coming to, start a program that ends up not being for them. They want you to succeed. Institutions that don't care about whether or not you succeed, they just want you to enroll. Go now, do it. I'd say that would be the first red flag. And the aggressive recruiting, it's not just advertisements. They will call you constantly, multiple times a day. We have veterans who tell us about getting called at all hours of the day, all day long, all week long, hundreds of phone calls, and that's another major red flag.
And, what does a new administration mean to all of you? I would like to maybe start with Sanders. What does the elections mean to you? Do you think it's going to have a big change? What do you think of that?
Well, I know that under this administration, we basically have no chance under DeVos to make any real change happen. So a new administration, the Biden's plans are not perfect by any means, but they are plans. 5 years ago, the very idea of student debt cancellation was laughed at, and now it's part of the policy platform for a presidential candidate. And there's been huge changes over the last few years, and so to me, a new administration really represents hope for change, especially as we get the student union going, student debtors union we're starting up, and other activism. We're going to have a real foothold to get a good start towards towards changing this system back to what it should be.
And I think just to add on Sanders, I think there's a lot of credits due to the debt collective and then the debt strikers. In a lot of ways, the similarities are like with Colin Kaepernick doing his kneeling, at the time, took a huge amount of criticism, but then now it's definitely, accepted, and a lot of athletes are doing it. A lot of societies rallied around it. I think the debt collective and the debt strikers really started that movement, and now we are where we are.
And Alex, what does a new administration mean to you?
Optimism. I think, as for people who watched the film, the President Trump had a for-profit college, and that in itself is indicative of just the lack of regulation and oversight that's going to happen under his administration. And my worry is that if it's 4 more years of, this Trump DeVos Department of Education, the oversight is just going to be so lax in a time when so many students are going to be going to higher education. I think if there is a new administration, I don't want them dragging their feet. I don't want them going into, a lot of this like meditative, let's think about these regulations and policies. Like, no, we have a 5-alarm fire here. Like, they need to just come out guns blazing. They need to figure out how to stop these schools, because I'm just tired of taking these phone calls with students who are crying or just asking for help because they have nowhere else to turn to. It's just unacceptable.
And I just want to give a shout out to Theresa Sweet. She had a nice response. She sued the Department of Education over some of these issues we're talking about. So I want to follow up with Toby. What is borrower defense for those people who don't know? I don't know who doesn't know what borrower defense is in this group, but What does that process mean? I mean, generally, when you don't like something, you can return it and get a refund, but that's not quite working here. Can you tell us a little bit about where the litigation is?
So borrower defense is the idea, and it's an idea that's in federal law and federal regulation, and it's also in student loan contracts between student loan borrowers and the government, that if your school violates state law or violates law as to you, that you should be able to discharge your loan. And it's been there for a long time, but as a few people have pointed out, it was the debt collective and the organizing and the debt strike around Corinthian that brought this idea out into like the operational reality and really started to make the change that we're still fighting really hard for. Like I think everyone on this Zoom is fighting really hard for. And so since 2015, some of the things that have happened are that the department has decided that some groups of people can get their loans discharged due to borrower defense, which is itself completely unprecedented. Like that was a huge organizing victory that was a result of so much student pressure. And they have also rescinded that decision and gone back the other way. And so we have a lawsuit about that. They've made 2 sets of new regulations. They've illegally delayed one of the sets of regulations. We had some lawsuits about all those. It's been a really big mess. And the thing is, like, I think this goes to what Sanders was saying about the election, and maybe what Alex was saying too, that there's hope. You know, we always have to keep hoping that the next step will be better, but there's also not, it's like not the time to sit down, because this debacle has been going on for so many decades. And this particular chapter of this debacle, like especially around Corinthian and ITT and Art Institutes and Brooks, has been, it didn't start under this administration. And so I don't think we should take for granted that anyone will fix it besides us, like all of us working together.
Got it. And I want to also talk a little bit about the movie. All of you have watched it. Raymond, what was one of the biggest takeaways from the movie, or in general, if you don't want to talk about the movie?
Yeah, Alex, I'm sure has many takeaways. For me, it was the students that you're speaking to. At VES, we work a lot with veterans who had been taken advantage of, lost their GI Bill. For example, his name's Kendrick. He's from Nevada. He served in the Army, and he's a disabled veteran, and he was recruited by Argosy. And I don't want to go through all of it. If you've seen the film, it was just low quality education, and he felt like he was given the runaround. So he left, and then he went to go enroll at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, and found out that he didn't have enough of his GI Bill left to actually finish his degree. And we got to work with him. And for those of you watching, if you're looking for any help, this is something that we do. So please reach out, obviously. But we were able to work with him, help get his disability rating increased, help get him his vocational rehabilitation, which now is going to allow him to finish his degree, thank goodness, at the University of Nevada. But it's these stories that we hear constantly, whether it's at my work or in films like this, or just other veterans that I know who have had this experience. They've served, they've sacrificed, they've earned this benefit. And unlike Title IV funds, if theirs gets taken by, the University of Phoenix or DeVry, and they end up with useless degrees or useless credits, they don't get their GI Bill back. So for me, I think it was his name's Zach. He's in the film, a friend of mine actually now, it cuts to your core to hear him talk about his experience, and you just want to make him stop. It's empowering.
Right, and I want to throw thanks for sharing that. Sanders, I want to throw you the same question, and to the audience, I think Sanders was the one who had this idea of having this discussion. So Sanders, can you tell us a little about what the film made you feel like?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the first time I saw it, I remember being struck by this feeling of like, this is my story, in kind of the same way that like if there was a movie about someone who's robbed at gunpoint, if a person would see that movie who was robbed at gunpoint, they would be like, wow, this speaks to me on a different level, and I realized that, this was my story. I was lied to by one of these for-profit colleges. I felt the pain funnel. I witnessed these same things. Because the government and the accreditors were not doing their job to regulate these colleges. And I was struck by the fact that this is a modern problem that has happened within my lifetime, but definitely within my parents' lifetime. And since it's such a modern problem, it's a problem that we have the power to fix. And that's what I left. I went through a lot of emotions throughout the movie, a lot of sadness, a lot of anger. But at the end, I was left with the question, which I hope a lot of people who saw the movie were left with, which is, what do we do now? Because we got to change this. Like, this can't stand for future generations. We have to identify this and do something to change it.
I have one final question for Alex before we move on to some interactive Q&A. So guys, audience, please leave your questions in the chat box. I'm going to get to them. A lot of you are having a very vibrant discussion, so I'm actually reading that. But Alex, if you were to make a follow-up movie, and by the way, guys, I've asked Alex this every time we've had this conversation, what would it look like?
That's a good question. I think something I learned, I think in fail state, what I'm most proud about is my team and I were able to show the intricacy of how policy like played with each other, like how the disinvestment of our public schools effectively gave rise to for-profit colleges. They were filling in a void left by these traditional schools. And fail state's a very, dives deep into the policy, dives deep into the politics. I think in the next film, if I had got to make it, would be to focus more on the student stories. I think to have more students in the run up to making fail state to everything that's occurred after it. And, I still get emails from students all the time, former students reaching out for help. The numbers are staggering. I remember a key moment in making fail state when I started looking for students to interview for the film. And it was so easy to find them on Facebook. Within 2 weeks, I found over 100 students. They were posting on, if I just typed in like, searched a BuzzFeed article or searched a for-profit college article by the New York Times, in the comments on Facebook, there would be hundreds of people commenting and say, oh, this happened to me. I went to this such and such school, and I'd reach out. And I think after fail state's been made, there's so many students who are sitting there. And I know Mary's in the audience who attended so many years ago. Sanders attended so many years ago, who are with that, they're not in that window where they can get that recourse, the financial recourse from the Department of Education. I think part of what the next film would be is to show that it's not just the recent students, all these students deserve to have, their loans remedied. Because it's just back to my criticism of the Obama administration when they were, running the Department of Education is like, we had this 5-alarm fire, and to do, borrower defense is awesome. We need it. But to put the onus onto students to effectively fill out an application, to do all the stuff when it's so clear that these schools were doing it on a widespread basis, they should just blanket it. Just, here you go. And now what we see in the Trump administration is they made it so difficult to actually get a borrower defense through. You have to produce all these documents, all this stuff. I think Toby said it earlier. I just really appreciate what she said is we need to stop putting the onus on students and on borrowers. It's just, the system is designed to take advantage of people. The best comparison I heard was from Bob Shireman in the film. The clip didn't appear in it. We had to edit it out, but he said, you don't know you have a bad doctor until you're on the operating table losing your leg. And that's, I think here we have an education.
Shout out to Bob Shireman. I don't know where he is, somewhere in California. Bob used to work for the Obama administration. He used to be a official, and he currently heads I think a nonprofit organization. Just type in Bob Shireman, you'll find him everywhere. And he does a lot of work basically exposing some of these shady schools. Someone said the next film should be the success of the fight very optimistic there. So before we, I want to take some questions from two people you mentioned. Marian Lewandowski submitted a recorded question. She went to Brown Mackie College. And by the way, guys, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. But let's listen to Marian's question first.
I think Lindsay's going to be handling that.
Right. And yeah. And anyone who has who wants their story told, contact Alex. How to flood someone's inbox. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
And if you don't want, if he's too busy, send me an email. I always love listening to your stories, and all of us, we just want to hear from you. No one should be left unheard. So I don't know if
Lindsay, is there any issues with the technical stuff?
Right. If not, I can help.
Maybe we ask a question from the audience.
Yeah. Right. So let's go to the audience questions then. If you have any, what is the name of Bob's nonprofit? I think it's called the Century Foundation. You can Google that. Yeah, I met Bob. He's great. He is great. Some questions. So why don't I start off with a very, very broad question for Toby. If an administration comes in tomorrow, they can cancel student debt just like that. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Sure. There are a lot of ways that a new administration or even an existing administration could make people's lives better with respect to student debt without the need to go through Congress, which has been, its own challenge. And so certainly, like, one of the things that we've been talking about in this conversation is the absolute insanity of the borrower defense process as it's been set up, and that, based on the really clear and broad evidence that exists, there's just no reason. And in fact, like, it seems to me very unlawful for the government to be collecting on so many of these totally bogus debts that do continue to exist. So that's an easy wipeout. Those loans that were procured by fraud, they can just must just be canceled. Similarly, as to closed school discharge and certain other types of like statutory discharges that have application forms, the Department of Education also has authority to wipe out those debts without applications. And so that's one of the paths that any Department of Education can take to make debt go away quickly. Beyond that, the Secretary of Education has authority. It's called the statutory provision says the authority to settle and compromise debts, and that authority is given to the Department of Education, and it's incredibly broad, and it includes the authority to cancel student loans. And so that's a much broader brush to paint with. And a Secretary of Education who thought that the student loan program was and existing student debt was, hurting people and increasing inequality, that's a tool available to them to change course.
Yeah, I think we have Lindsay back, and she said she'll be able to share the question now. So shall we roll the tape?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Mary. I'm 61 years old, and I owe almost $40,000 in student loans. Due to the fact that my loans are 9 years old, I do not meet the requirements for the new loan forgiveness program. I do have telemarketers calling me and telling me that they can take care of this problem. They will file all the paperwork, but it'll cost me $289 a month. I wanted to know, is this a legit thing? Is it my only recourse? Or will I have to wait and let them take the money out of my Social Security check when I finally do receive one?
Really good question. So I see Toby responding immediately. Toby, do you want to take this one first?
Well, I don't think that I'm in a good position to give individual legal advice over Zoom in this big group setting, but I guess like one thing that I just wanted to flag is that the borrower defense rules up until really recently allow anyone to apply to have their debt canceled no matter when they attended. So the idea that just because you attended school 9 years ago or any number of years ago means that you are not eligible for borrower defense, that's not right. The newest rules, the ones that took effect in July 2020 and that we're challenging in court, do purport to limit the time frame that people have to apply, but that only applies to people, that rule only applies to people who took out loans after July 1st, 2020. And again, we're challenging that rule in court. And so that's one of, that's one of the pieces that is just totally ridiculous. And I, one of the reasons that I hope that rule will not stand.
Well, thank you for, everything that you're doing, because just because of some number and some rule, we shouldn't be limited to get access. But does anyone else want to respond to that?
Question for
As
Toby,
somebody who
actually.
also gets the phone calls, I just want to say, ignore those phone calls. Believe it or not, I was taken advantage by one of those. When working in this, it was even wilder. I had just started, so I wasn't super familiar with, these tactics, but I ended up spending $250 with them before I shut it down. And then they tried to bully me into paying the other $1,200 that they claimed that I owed. So I will say to anyone watching for that question, if you are getting those, ignore them. And you can also file, an official complaint, and you can report them.
Healthy dose of skepticism, everyone. Be always skeptical. Be like just really careful with these. Anyone on the phone trying to sell you something. If anyone else doesn't want to weigh in, I'm going to go to the second question now. That's okay. So we have RJ Impucino.
Hello, my name is RJ Impucino, and I was a former student of the Illinois Institute of Art, Schaumburg. I work with children currently as a gymnastics coach, and I don't want them to go through what I went through. My question is, how can we ensure that for-profit institutions do not take advantage of future students?
And this is a question someone else asked in the chat as well. How do you also, let me throw in there, how do you hold people accountable for the fraud that they have already done? So maybe we can start with Sanders.
Sure. After watching the film, I got really invested in protesting my own school and going to the open houses. And we had groups all over the country go out to the open houses on the same day and try to warn students from signing up. And so I really believe that we affected their bottom line and stopped and saved a lot of students from actually going down that same road. Anything you can do to warn people, get the message out that not to trust these schools, don't trust any people trying to sell you something on the phone. I think one of the biggest casualties of going to this school is our trust in people. I mean, I don't trust basically anybody unless they have as much debt as I do almost, because I just feel like they're out to use me again. So.
Definitely. And even now during this COVID time, it's even more difficult to sort of build trust with people. But the same person had actually asked, some of us have had read our stories read on the Senate floor. That is attention. We have stories. But Alex, how can we sort of move beyond this and get out of this cycle that we're all trapped in, where for-profit schools every now and then become more and more popular?
I think in how we saw what the Debt Collective was able to do and the Debt Strikers, kind of like plant those seeds and kind of begin the movement tree. In my opinion, I think we need a large scale policy change at the federal level. I've brought it up multiple times before, but I think we just cut off eligibility to all for-profit colleges and trade schools. I think that's one of the easiest silver bullet ways to do it. I think, what's fascinating is I've come across for-profit colleges that are outside of the federal financial aid system who are actually acting pretty well. But it's as soon as they enter the federal financial aid system, it's a race to the bottom. It's just how fast can we abuse students? How fast can we make as much money as we can, run the name into the ground, close shop, move on to the next for-profit college. And so for me, I think what I'm so glad about these student stories being read on the Senate floor, I mean, just a few years ago, that wasn't the case. And so we're getting there, like things are moving, and my hope with the next administration and hope with the next Congress is, you know, we're gonna have conversations about wide-scale loan discharges, plus also stronger protections, much stronger oversight of this industry. I don't know if they'll ever get to the point where they're just going to kill off eligibility for this schools. It's my dream, but I think there's a lot of steps that we can have up until that point.
And someone had a question, I think Dana, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Are all for-profit schools fraudulent? Who would like to answer that one? Perhaps Raymond, would you like to go?
Well, I can say, like, that's like the short answer is no, not all for-profits are fraudulent. I mean, some of these institutions we're talking about are teaching trades, but it's the concept, the business model is what we're really dealing with here. So not so much this, okay, so you don't want to go out and get a standard, like traditional associate's or bachelor's degree. And you see that a lot among veterans who want a non-traditional track to making an income, starting their family. They've already spent years in the military and now they're ready to get through this, which is part of what makes these schools attractive. But the truth is, the ones that are low quality, the ones that are predatory and fraudulent are these ones that Alex is talking about, the race to the bottom. They're going to spend 8% of the tuition you pay them on the instruction, and the rest is going to go to advertisement. It's going to go to recruitment, and it's because they know how to work the system and not actually provide a quality product to the students. Those are the ones that we want to watch out for. And one of the ways that we can do that is just like this, what we're doing here and what Failstate is doing, which is educating the demographics that are being targeted by these institutions for the big bucks that they can bring in. So we're talking veterans, we're talking minorities, low income, first generation. We should also be targeting those students and educating them about what makes a good school and what makes a not good school, how to tell the difference, because we were taken advantage of. I knew nothing. I didn't know what a registrar was before I started at community college, and I was 28. So.
And you're a first generation student as well.
Yeah.
Right. And someone in the comments mentioned that some of the boot camps that are becoming super popular, they are calling them a lot. I also get calls from these. I don't understand why they would target me, but seems like they're inviting trouble there. But just be careful when someone calls you. So I'm going to read out some questions from the Q&A box. Thank you, Toby, for flagging that to me. What do we do next after being denied by the Defense to Repayment Borrower Defense? I also have anecdotally heard of someone having 0% approved. What is that? What do they do then, Toby?
Well, the Department of Education has been churning out bogus denials, just like sort of what we've been calling blanket denials of everyone. And they don't take account of the evidence. And this is something that was raised in court. I know a lot of folks who are here tonight were in that court hearing. It was held over Zoom, which was kind of amazing. There were 500 people hearing from borrowers. And so it's another example of what, like Raymond, Alex, and Sanders are all talking about, where the power of like finding opportunities to really tell stories, and not only, well, to all sorts of audiences, including federal judges. And this federal judge was particularly moved and, really disturbed by the department's apparently unlawful denials, and is considering enjoining or ordering the department to stop making denials of this nature. But and so that the like papers on that are due on Friday, and so I don't know exactly when he'll make that decision. But even if so, it doesn't really get anyone to the end game of like, why am I still worrying about this? Why do I still have this loan? And so as things move through the courts, I think like on the sort of administrative process end, like you are entitled to move for reconsideration. I don't know that it makes perfect sense to do that right now while this process is still in upheaval, but it doesn't hurt. It probably also might not help. I think like staying engaged in the fight, like not giving up on the idea that debts that aren't fair shouldn't continue to live on and torture people, and finding ways to continue to resist that debt, to join with other people who are resisting, is really important. And so, you know, we are of course like collaborating with so many students who are in that situation, but I don't want anyone to think that like being in court or like having your name at the top of a lawsuit, even though that people are like doing really important work in those roles, those aren't the only or even the main important roles that people are playing in this legal fight.
And just another question from Marion. Are they able to take money from my Social Security?
The federal government can take SSDI, but not SSI to pay federal student loans.
Right. And if anyone has any other questions, keep them coming.
I guess, Arthi, I want to add something to the whole group chat.
Sure.
I think it's back to the optimism part of it. Like, as I'm no longer a third-party observer. I've now been involved in this fight for a while, but as a filmmaker, putting on my filmmaker hat on, I've had the pleasure of witnessing kind of like the huge organizing effort around this issue. I mean, just when I began making the film, I mean, there were so few groups out there working on for-profit college issues. There's a bunch of stuff on student loan debt in general, but just in the years of making Fail State, it's just been really great to see how many groups, how many legal groups, how many advocates, Veterans Education Success is a really good example of this, who've just come to the fight. And what I'm optimistic about is in the next administration, I think what Toby said earlier about this issue didn't begin under the current administration, but I think in the next administration, our voices are going to be really loud. Like we're ready. And so I think for the people who've been denied, like, let's just keep fighting. Like it will happen.
So just going back to Toby, Jonathan has just a follow-up. So should they wait to file an appeal on borrower defense? Should they try again? What should they do differently? And thank you, Alex, for that answer. Optimism. We'll get back to that in just a second.
I think that's the right place to focus, like what Alex is saying. I think that, as I said, there's not really a clear answer about what to ask of the federal government right now. Where don't stop fighting is my top line message, but like I don't think it's going to hurt you to file a reconsideration, but I don't think it's particularly going to help at this moment either. You don't get administrative forbearance back for filing reconsideration. I don't think it's going to be I don't think there's someone receptive on the other end, but I'm not saying I think you should give up. I just think that you have to find different ways to fight right now.
So a lot of people take out federal and private loans. Is there a different process if you have private loans?
Yeah, the federal borrower defense repayment process doesn't apply to private loans, but the same concept that loans procured by fraud aren't due or shouldn't be collected applies to private loans. It just applies a little differently.
So getting too much in the weeds, I'm going to ask another general question. Alex, what has happened to student debt? Why are we at $1.7 trillion?
That's a big question. I think, okay, so we have a system that its foundation is broken. And I think like there's two things that our country needs to do just on a very broad scale. One is we need to forgive student loan debt. But that's not the only solution there, because that just resets the clock, right? It still opens up a new generation to fraud and abuse. It still opens up a new generation to absurd amount of student loans that they have to take out to go to school. I think, for people who watch the film, a lot of this has to do with the disinvestment of our public colleges and universities. They don't have the budget to market to students like a for-profit college does. in a lot of these economic downturns, they have to do massive scale cuts to their institutions. You know, in the film, you know, I often say that the film is the same. It's a love letter to community colleges too, because one, I am a community college graduate, but two, I find them to be some of the best types of institutions our country has to offer. It's so uniquely American. No other country really has something like this. And community colleges and for-profit colleges often compete largely over the same types of students. Back, you know, first generation, students of color, immigrants, you know, single parents, parents. And so oftentimes though is when you cut these public, you know, spending on community colleges, you know, students are then welcomed with huge class sizes, not that many counselors to advise them. They get lost in the system. And then a for-profit college comes along and says, why would you ever wait 3 years for a nursing program? Why don't you just come to this school right here and we'll immediately enroll you in 8 weeks. You'll begin in like 8 weeks. And actually in the film, if you remember Laura Brozek, who is a recruiter at ITT Tech, she was talking about the pain funnel. And she told me in an interview, it's like, yeah, you know, we were using the pain funnel, but I didn't really have to use it all often. All I had to say was, look at the community college nearby you. They're overflowing with students. You're never going to graduate. And so it's like, come to ITT Tech. Like you're going to have your 4-year degree in 3 years. You're going to be getting your job because here's our job placement rates. So back to the, you know, just trying to simplify this. We need to give remedy to the students who've already been hurt by the system. But then the next step, I think, is one, just dramatically stronger oversight of for-profit colleges. Two, huge reinvestment in our public colleges, give them the money that they need to have, you know, the best professors, the best marketing, the best student to professor ratio, more college advisors. That's going to go a long way in helping students.
And a lot of people in the comments are mentioning that pain funnel that you've so elegantly highlighted in that movie. There are ways to fix this, is what I'm sensing, but it's just going to take a lot of commitments from different politicians, different states, and things like that. I have a question from someone who did not attend a for-profit college. I am interested in this issue. Candler says because of some work that he's doing with this University of Georgia. How can I get involved in this fight? So Raymond, Toby, how can he get involved in this fight? Alex even, Sanders even, how can this person get involved?
Yeah. I'll share first. First of all, we're always open to getting folks involved. With our work with VES, we focus on the GI Bill and protecting it. Luckily, well, not luckily, but that works out that I end up working in these larger circles because of how it's kind of the access, the giant access for these predatory institutions, low quality institutions to get this money is through veterans. And so we become like watchdogs of some of the worst actors who are taking advantage of that. And you can contact us. And if there is, if somebody from my team would put our website up on, I think it's already gone up a couple of times, but just one last time, you can go there and contact us through there, share it with friends, share it with folks who, especially veterans. If you know folks, keep it in your back pocket. If they are dealing with, you know, being taken advantage of, preyed upon by one of these institutions, we're here to help with that for sure.
Sanders, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I want people to think about like the 1.7 trillion in debt we have right now is a terrible thing, but it's also in a way our power because it's an insane amount of money. Back in 2017, there was 3,000 people defaulting a day. It's gone up since then. And those people who are defaulting, they should join the strike. They have nothing to lose. They should be striking. And right now, there's never been a student debtors union in the history of our country before. But the Debt Collective just started one up in the last few months. And there's chapters forming all over the country. I'm actually in charge of the San Diego chapter. And that kind of collective action is what's going to give us real power to change the course of things and have some real bargaining in the next administration. So if people want to join the union, it's debtcollective.org, and you can join. Dues are optional, but encouraged. And it's a chance to be a part of something like truly formational in our country. And it's exciting. I want people, even though it's a really hard time right now under the debt, people are desperate for change. I want them to be excited about what we can do to change the future.
And Toby, before I ask you the same question, I'm getting a lot of, I'm seeing a lot of navient and like naming and of certain companies. So, you know, what happens when you have a problem with your service? So should they come to you, or how should they resolve a dispute with their student loan company?
I mean, student loan companies are terrible, and they're profiting off of all this misery that we're talking about. And, you know, we're small, everyone on this call, like we're small teams. We're helping as many people as we can. Like the way our tool that we use is litigation, and we take on litigation that we think can really get at the underlying problem. But I think servicers, they're the symptom. And I think that I know this isn't an immediate answer, but you should take Sanders' advice and like fight against that system and Alex's, you know, for real change in how we offer and pay for higher education. That is like the only thing that's going to make the problems with servicers go away.
And
do you want to weigh
our
in?
thing-
We often also,
Al.
No.
Sorry.
I guess real quick, Raymond, then you can go. I guess like back to there's a person from University of Georgia. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to screenings just across the country and have people who walk up to me and say, I never knew about this. It just wasn't on their radar at all. And I think in the work that I've been doing on this kind of grassroots type screening deal and how many screenings I've done is trying to get this word out as much as possible, because then, you know, I've been doing screenings at law schools to get more lawyers to jump into this fight. Someone here on the panel just talked about how, you know, we're small teams and like, you know, there's so many affected borrowers by this. And so it's just like, there's only so much that we can handle right now. And so we need more people to this fight, more people advocating for students. I think at the University of Georgia and other universities, it doesn't necessarily need a lawyer. You can have professors start collecting stories, get these stories documented. This is me speaking as a filmmaker now, but like, you know, I started digging into stories from students who were in the 1980s and 1990s who were abused by trade schools and trucking schools and all of that. Those stories are totally hidden, but they experience a lot of the same stuff. And so it's just trying to get these stories documented, because the more people that know about these stories, it's just the wider, you know, organizing that we're going to have against these schools in the future. And it was great that I think Biden in the last debate or the debate before mentioned the for-profit colleges, because we didn't have that long ago.
yeah. And
Sorry.
that was what and also recommend that everybody, you know, email your representatives, you know, call your senators. This is, I know you, maybe that sounds trite, or like you feel like, oh, well, yeah, what's that going to do? It will do a lot. When these individuals know that this is on your radar, when these individuals hear from folks who were taken advantage by schools, or just its constituents who were pissed off about this and they want their legislator to do something about it, that does make a difference. It makes a huge difference. Get other people to send them as well, letting the legislators know that this is not okay and something needs to be done. Because let me tell you, those of us that are going and talking to them on a regular basis have told them what needs to be done. They know what needs to be done, but they don't know it's a priority until they start to see it start to come up among their constituents in their emails and start to realize that it's a major deal. I mean, that's one of the reasons that Biden is focusing on it so much. He's even spoken about the 90-10 loophole.
And I think just an added sweetener to what Raymond just said, don't do form letter emails to your representatives. Like, actually take the time and write something from the heart. I wouldn't say it needs to be a whole book, but write something that, like, it could just be as simple as, this is my story. I'm in your district. I just want to be heard. And then get the like Sanders, you know, I love that you were doing all the protests, but get your, you know, for students who are not involved in this organizing effort, go call up your old classmates, get them to start sharing their stories, like get everyone involved, because I think there's a lot of shame that is entrenched in this type of space with a lot of students feel like it's their fault, but get them all out. Get them to start writing these people, get their stories documented. Just That's me as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Document it.
Everyone, I would say a lot of you are very good storytellers when I listen to some of your stories. So maybe you can just write a Facebook post or start there, start small, write an Instagram post, set it public, see what the reception is like. But we just have 3 minutes. I'm going to try and end this on a positive note. What has all of you excited about this new year? I don't know who would like to start. Maybe we can go with Toby first.
Well, it won't be 2020 anymore. Can that be mine? I mean, let me just say, I'm really excited to take depositions of Department of Education officials, which is one of the things that got ordered. That has never happened in any of our cases or in any of anyone else's cases in this area. We're going to be asking people questions on the record about what they did with respect to borrower defense and why. And that'll be in 2020, but it is certainly something that I'm looking forward to.
Sanders, would you like to go next?
Sure. I just know that we have allies on the left, like AOC and the Squad and Bernie Sanders, who have championed student debt relief. And, Biden has made it a part of his policy platform. So we have allies on the left, and I am very hopeful for the future. Hopefully the election goes well, and we have a lot of wins on the left, and we get that power. But just I want people to be excited about the power in numbers that we all have as we come together as a union and collectively organize. We can make a big difference. And for-profits, they can't do what they used to do. They're on the defensive now, and we know they try to adapt. Like there's WazU and different schools like that trying to start up, but they can't pull it off as easy as they used to. And we're going to fight against them, and I'm just super excited, and I'm excited for Fail State, continuing to share it with people, and people to be empowered and not be burdened by their debt as much as they're empowered to fight against it.
For sure. We'll go with Raymond and then Alex for the final word.
Yeah. I'm super excited. It has nothing to do with who gets elected or who doesn't, because what we're seeing is change across the board. We're seeing new laws passing at the state level, at the federal level, that are starting to hold these, whether it's a for-profit institution or a student debt, student borrower protections and things like that. We're seeing it all over the place, and more in every state, increased interest in the work that we're doing. That's what's exciting, because that's been done under a Department of Education that's essentially working against us. So even if we don't get that new shiny Department of Education secretary, then we will still continue this momentum and increase it.
Alex.
I think I've kind of said it already in a lot of my answers, but I think just to go back to what in one clear answer is that I'm so optimistic about just going forward of just how many groups have come to this table to fight and work with students and work with former students and work for borrowers. And having these borrowers and former students also join in the fight. And I know Veterans Education Success did a hill storming with a bunch of veteran students, former students. It's just, I think what I'm most optimistic about is, unlike the 2008, 2009 recession or 2009 recession, this just feels different. Like we're going into a fight with a lot more power and a lot more strength, and back to the strength in numbers thing that Sanders just said. And, just a quick short story from making Fail State. I remember in the earliest days, going through the story and feeling so alone. I was just like, how is this not on front page, every New York Times, everything? Why is this not being discussed? This is just the scale of it was staggering. And that moment where I was just in this room, in this very bedroom, making the film and feeling so alone. Now I don't feel alone anymore. I feel like everyone is here. So I think, back to what I said, I'm optimistic. I think it's just going to be different.
And I just want to also say, the people in the Q&A and the chat, you guys are so smart. I mean, some of these schools that you've sort of singled out for what you think is for-profit schools that are still perpetuating some of the issues that we saw in the movie. It's interesting. So there's some questions that we didn't get to, but I'm sorry we don't have time. If you want, you can email us. You can email me. I can answer your question, especially Mary James. I'm sorry I didn't answer your question. But we're sort of out of time. We can talk about this forever, right, guys?
It never ends.
Yeah.
It ends, and we'll try to make a part 2 for this
Oh,
movie.
and by the way, everyone, I'm keeping the video link, the documentary link active for 2 more days because there's been so much demand for it just in the past 48 hours. So it's going to be active. If you want to show other people, you're welcome to. Me is to plug in the filmmaker. If you really like the film, go review us. We're getting hit. I mean, Sanders has seen it. We're getting hit by right-wing trolls quite often with reviews being like, "Oh, this is so poorly investigated." I could use the help.
Oh my goodness.
Alex, thank you for sharing it now, and also just for everything that you're doing to bring this conversation together in so many ways, like all across the country for years and years. It's such a powerful thing that you're doing, and I'm just so grateful.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for you guys and Carrie and Raymond, and yeah, I love your team over there at the project.
It's a great team.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you want to stick around, I don't know what, we'll just hang off for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But thank you, all of you, for.
I did see a question about sharing it widespread. Unfortunately, we can't. Our distributor would get really mad. So have them, if they want to see the film, just have them register through Eventbrite. I'll monitor it through Thursday. So I'll literally just keep sending the link. So just do that. Wait, you can't post it. Otherwise I have to take the link down.
Right. Copyright issues, we all understand.
Yeah.
You also have to make money. So funny, someone said the loudest right-wing voices habituate the interwebs. It's a very profound statement about the way our media works. And so we'll just drop the link there, but thank you everyone once again.
And this recording of Zoom will be posted to all the student groups too. So if you want to show it to anyone, you're welcome to.